Hello everyone, I'm Eoh Ji-hye and welcome to In the Newsroom, where we bring you the behind-the-scenes look on how we deliver the news to you. But first, let's go over to Hwang Ji-hye for a quick rundown of some of the top stories that made headlines this week. Ji-hye, hello, take it away.
Hi Ji-hye, I'm bringing you this week's headlines from the Gwacheon government complex. And right behind me is the Finance Ministry, where I usually report from after press briefings. So why don't I begin with the announcements made at today's press briefing. Korea's Finance Ministry expects the Korean economy to grow by 3.3% this year, down from its earlier outlook of 3.7%. The revision comes amid rising concerns over the persisting Eurozone debt crisis and its impact on the Korean economy. And an update on the Eurozone crisis, Spain has made an official request for 100 billion euros to bail out its troubled banks, while Cyprus, the Eurozone's third smallest economy, also wants a bailout to the tune of over half the size of its economy. Cheaper coffee for Korea and cheaper cars for Colombia. Korea finished its free trade negotiations with Colombia, agreeing to scrap tariffs on nearly all products within 10 years. And Korea won't be able to import Iranian crude from July 1st, as the European Union has moved forward with its insurance ban on ships carrying Iranian oil. And after Seoul decided to ban oil imports from Iran, the Islamic Republic has threatened to halt all Korean imports. A nationwide strike by Korean truckers this week as they seek a 30% raise in trucking fees and a cut in fuel cost. The strike is posing a threat to the transportation of the country's cargo. And with less than 6 months to go until Korea's presidential elections, the ruling Saenuri Party has settled on its original date of August 12th for its primary. Over in Egypt, a new era has begun. The Muslim Brotherhood's Mohamed Morsi became Egypt's first democratically elected president over a year after the ousting of Hosni Mubarak. Back here in the nation, with just 30 days remaining until the start of the London Olympics, Arirang News checked up on how the Korean national team is getting in its last practice sessions to compete with the world's best athletes. Well, that's all from me for now. I'll be back with more headlines next week. Back to you, Ji-hye.
Okay, hello guys, and of course, welcome Jin-joo. You've been traveling with the president for almost 2 weeks, 10 days to be exact.
Like 11 days?
11 days,
perhaps,
and it took you to 4 major nations around Latin America. Walk us through.
Well, to start with, I went to Mexico for the G20 summit, and then Brazil, Rio de Janeiro for the Rio Plus 20 summit. And then we moved on to Chile, and then Colombia, and then before returning back to Korea, we went to San Francisco.
The time difference was quite drastic.
It was hectic. Well, actually, the trip was 11 days long, but the time we spent in the plane was about more than 2 days, 55 hours or so. So that made the trip really tired for the reporters and, of course, for the president, I guess. So time difference and the time we had to stay in the plane was really difficult for me. Yeah.
And what was the biggest achievement, do you think, from this particular trip?
Well, of course, there was the G20 summit and the Rio Plus 20 summit, those big international events. But for Korea, I think FTA was the biggest issue and the biggest accomplishment during his trip, because Korea already signed FTAs with Chile and Peru. And we concluded negotiations with Colombia during this trip, and then trade officials are trying to resume negotiations with Mexico as well. And these 4 nations have created a Pacific alliance, so signing FTAs with all these 4 countries will be a very big opportunity for Korea to enter the Latin American market and increase its influence there. So I think that was the biggest accomplishment.
Korea and Colombia have concluded their FTA talks, which first began in 2009. The announcement comes during President Lee Myung-bak's state visit to the Latin American country. The trade deal calls for more than 96% of all FTA products from both nations to have their tariffs scrapped within 10 years. President Lee stressed during a joint press conference with his Colombian counterpart Juan Manuel Santos on Monday that the FTA will further enhance bilateral ties between the two nations.
우리 한국은 남미의 관문으로 콜롬비아를 앞으로 대할 것이고 또 콜롬비아는 아세아의 관문으로 한국을 하겠다는 그런 양국과의 굳건한 관계로 발전하기를 서로 합의하였습니다.
Trade officials from Korea expect the trade pact to be ratified as early as this year. And after wrapping up his four-nation Latin American tour in Colombia, President Lee arrived in San Francisco to meet with Korean residents here before heading back to Seoul on Tuesday. Eoh Jin-joo, Arirang News, San Francisco.
You covered a story on G20, like you said, the Rio Plus 20 as well. Lot of global meetings taking place. How would you evaluate Korea's stance or Korea's presence at those meetings?
Well, President Ji Myeong-gil was the one that put forth the idea of like staying away from trade protectionism at a time like this, because he, as you can see, him traveling around the Latin American countries to like sign these FTAs and push forward with that, that shows a lot that he believes in that trade and free trade will help the economy to recover and boost the economy, like global economy as a whole. So I think in that particular sense, like Korea had a lot to say. So yeah,
It's been good to know. So good work, Jin-joo. We are delighted to have you back. Well, Korea seems to be gripped by a flurry of, union strikes in recent months. I mean, can you tell us more?
Yes, I mean the strike first started from the taxi drivers that it covered a week earlier, 2 weeks earlier, and now this week was mostly about this national strike of truckers. 13 major ports in Korea reported disruptions to their operations on the second full day of a nationwide strike of truck drivers. The Ministry of Land Transport and Maritime Affairs said that as of noon on Tuesday, a little over a quarter of the nation's 11,000 cargo trucks were out of commission. The major port of Busan saw a cut in cargo traffic by over 50% over a 24-hour period beginning late Sunday evening after the national strike by truckers took effect. The country's defense ministry said on Tuesday that it will supply extra military vehicles and drivers to ports during the strike to help minimize major disturbances to freight transportation.
But what do they want? What are these?
So they're calling for basically a 30% raise in trucking fees, and also they want a cut in fuel prices and road charges so that they can cut their costs when they're doing their job. They also demanded various labor rights guarantees, and that's basically raise in trucking fees. I mean, it's sort of really interconnected. Their demands are very interconnected. But the unionized truckers are trying to push for their demands, while the government is saying what you're demanding is too much. Too much raise increase, especially like 30% raise in trucking fees is not really. They're saying it's not realistic to do that. So.
Ji, I know you need to go somewhere right now to cover your story.
Today I have a story on the household debt, which is, I think, a major issue in the Korean economy. So.
Okay, great. I'm gonna let you go. Good luck. Have fun. So now that she is out of the way, let's get back to our conversation that we had with you, Jin-joo. I mean, of course, like traveling with the president, there must be a lot of things that all our viewers would like to know. I mean, I'm sure Myung-gil has a question.
Yeah, I had a question to ask. I mean, as a great fan of airplanes, personally, I've never been on a Air Force One, which actually flies the president of Korea. So, can you sort of tell us some fun episodes, or how it was like in the Air Force One? How it's different from maybe the commercial airplanes?
The seats that our reporters are sitting on are not that big, or but still the food is great. It's different from the other commercial airplanes. We can get whatever we want.
Yeah, the service was great. I mean, thinking back, I think it was quite accommodating. Plus, I have a very fond memory when it comes to Air Force One, because I think it was last January was my last travel, last time I was traveling with the president, and they somehow knew in advance, and they prepared a small gift and a piece of cake and a glass of champagne to send me off. It was a very good memory. It was quite delightful, actually. All right, well, Myung-gil, of course, I had a pleasure of talking to you earlier this week on semiconductors in Korea.
Yes, the semiconductor industry.
Right. Can you tell us more?
Well, starting this month on June 7th, Samsung, they announced plans to invest more than $2 billion just for upgrading their logic processor memory chip units in Hwasong. Samsung Electronics, already a world leader in TVs and smartphones, is now taking the fight to Intel for the #1 slot in semiconductors, betting on strong growth in the so-called logic chips that are the brains inside today's fast-selling smart mobile devices.
System semiconductors are categorized into memory and non-memory chips. Memory chips mostly store data, while non-memory chips have specialized functions, such as consuming and transporting digital information.
Korean companies such as Samsung and Hynix have more than 65% share in the world's DRAM memory chip market, and the non-memory chip market is expected to top $200 billion in 2013, with an annual growth rate of more than 6%. By 2015, the global market for application processors is expected to jump fourfold to $33 billion, which is good news for leading AP makers such as Samsung, Qualcomm, and Texas Instruments. Samsung is betting that smartphones and tablets will be the real growth drivers in the future. Currently, Samsung only have a market share of less than 5% of the non-memory chip market. And with this announcement, Samsung plans to fight or so compete with Intel in actually broadening the market within this non-memory chip
So Intel
share.
is the biggest.
Yeah, currently they have more than 80% share of the total market industry. But the one good hope is that since Samsung, they have more than 60% share within the mobile application processor market, and that's also a non-memory chip. And Samsung is they have this big potential and strength with their launch of Galaxies and other tablet PCs that there is some kind of big hope within this announcement that they have made.
Right. Well, market certainly looks ripe with potential there.
Yes, that is true.
Promising indeed. Any stories that we might be looking forward to next week?
Well, I have to keep on searching, but yes, I think I'll be covering some more details towards, I guess, company-related issues, especially like yesterday, the fact that Samsung Electronics, the Galaxy Tab with the Apple, the infringement and the preliminary injunctions. I guess next week there might be some more developing stories on that, so maybe I could follow that up, which might be interesting.
Very interesting indeed.
Yep.
And Jin-joo, you're going to take a good rest?
I just arrived last night, so I didn't have the time to go to the presidential office and check out the next week's schedule. So I'll have to do that later today or late tomorrow.
Right, good to know. Okay, guys, another great week. Thank you very much. Hope to see you guys next week with more.
See you.
All right. See ya.
Last week, this Japanese man visited the site of the statue of a comfort woman set up across from the Japanese embassy and called it a prostitute monument. Today's protest is the first protest right after that incident, so I think it'll be interesting to see what reactions people have, what emotions they bring to the site of protest. It is 11:20 a.m. Wednesday, and we just arrived at the Japanese embassy in Seoul. I'm gonna walk over there and see what it looks like, around the Peace Monument, the statue of a comfort woman. 이분이 그분 맞죠? 말뚝 테러 하시는 분. 이걸 갖고 계신 이유가 있나요?
다시 보면
그렇죠. 제지해야 하니까. He's holding a picture of the Japanese man who put a signboard next to the girl statue. So they want to make sure that the same man does not return to the site and doesn't do anything harmful. It's about 40 minutes before the protest starts, but there are already several local media, people are here to shoot the scenes of the protest, before what it looks like before the protest.
혼자서 이 길을 지키느라고 수고가 많았습니다.
For the day's Wednesday protest, I think there are about 200 people gathered.
일본 보수단체들이 갖다 놓았을 것이라고 짐작이 되는 말뚝 사건 때문에 할머니들의 인권과 명예를 회복하자는 내용의 시위를 시작하도록 하겠습니다.
Because of that sensitive, incident involving the right-wing Japanese men, I think people are angry, although they are kind of putting it low and hiding it. So it's very intense at the protest site. It's very heated, and I could just feel that heat myself.
테러를 행한 것에 대해서 우리가 어떻게 대응할 것인가, 개인에게 초점을 맞출 것인가, 아니면 전체 일본 사회에 초점을 맞출 것인가.
우리가 주의 깊게 보면 알겠지만은 그 일 중심에 일본 정부가 있음이 읽히고 있습니다.
I myself am overwhelmed by the complexity of the issue that there is. This protest is not only to condemn Japan for not acknowledging its wartime crimes, but also they are saying the Korean government is not doing right by saying that this can be dealt with in a humanitarian way, because Japan still needs to pay for its legal liability. I'm trying to find a Japanese national that I can talk to, but it's kind of hard to find somebody that's from Japan and who can also speak English.
네, 이거는 역사적인 사실인데요. 그래도 인정을 계속 안 하고 있는 일본 정부를 보고.
This was the first Wednesday protest after that incident. So, to talk about the significance of today's event, I'm gonna start with that story, but that's not gonna be the main focus of my story. I'm gonna focus more on the South Korea-Japan relations, and in that broader sense, I'm gonna write about this comfort women issue. Koreans gathered in front of the Japanese embassy in Seoul Wednesday, calling on Japan to fully admit to forcing young Korean women into sexual slavery during World War II.
Hey guys, I'm Sean Lim, one of the anchors here at Arirang, and today we have a very special guest. He was the former senior Asia correspondent at CNN and was bureau chief of CNN in Hong Kong as well as Beijing. And he covered the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. It's none other than Mike Chinoy. And he's joining us today to give us a very special lecture on how to do reporting, especially in a foreign environment. So we're gonna take a look at his seminar. A lot of our reporters are gathered and very eager to hear the wisdom he has to impart. So let's go.
Hwang Ji-hye, who's the president and CEO of Arirang, is a very old and dear friend, and we were colleagues at CNN for a very long time. And so when she asked me if I would come and share some of my experiences and insights about broadcast journalism, I was delighted to do so. A lot of the reporters at Arirang are fairly new and are sort of learning as they do, and TV is a complicated business, and I had the good fortune to be a TV journalist for nearly 30 years. So I thought it would be helpful to try and share some observations about the nature of doing television and doing high-quality journalism to see if I could be helpful.
Or even if we could put Arirang in the same group, what's our value now?
Well, television is this combination of video and sound and words. And done properly, it's got the ability to really have the reporter make the viewer feel like the viewer's there, experiencing the event, meeting the people. And so what I wanted to do was to share some tips on how to approach stories, on how to get information, on how to structure a TV report in such a way that you do the best job you can with the material so that people will be excited to watch. Ultimately, the most important thing is to try and get at the truth as best you can understand it in the fairest and most accurate and complete and balanced way, and then use the tools that the medium of television provides, pictures, sound, to tell a story so that it simultaneously informs people, gives them information about something that's important, but also engages them, lets them feel more connected to the world around them.
So we just finished this great session with Mike, and he was able to really give us some of the concrete ways on how to improve our stories. He mentioned stuff like getting the right sound bites, getting the right sound effects, and learning how to work with the cameraman to get some more visual, action-oriented shots. And I think a lot of our reporters, especially the junior ones, but even the senior ones, can really incorporate a lot of these new elements in creating a better story. So I'm really excited to get started on some of the techniques that he presented here today.
Korea's finance ministry 다시 해야지. For the ousting of Hosni 다시 해야겠다.
Is the maid
지금 끊어가도 돼요? I don't know why.